Hey everybody, it's me, Rita, and today we're going to talk about why was the Old Testament so unbelievably harsh with people because God and man had not yet met. So this is something um, that's kind of a controversial topic because um, of the age-old question, why do bad things happen to good people? Isn't everyone on average good most of the time? Why was the Old Testament so unbelievably harsh with people? But this is specifically dealing with a certain time period. So let me get some water and we'll get started. The big thing about the Old Testament, everything became, hey guys, hey Lord, everything became very difficult to navigate after a few thousand years have passed. It was a difficult thing to deal with, following all the rules that God had for man, and why everything was so unbelievably difficult. So I want to go into that. I want to go into, hey guys, hey. Yeah, Kenneth and Mary Lou and Louise. I want to talk about why this was so. Oh, and I want to start out thanking everybody. I want to thank you for your financial contributions, your blessings of me, your prayers for me, all the wonderful things that you give me. I just want to thank you so much. I've gotten lots of financial donations and support from people, and I just really want to thank everyone who has contributed to me. And okay, so let's get started on this. In the Old Testament, things were extremely harsh. Even before God got directly involved in the picture and said, okay, we're going to have things a certain way, you have to follow these rules, and if you don't follow these rules, then you're going to suffer the consequences. I'm going to destroy the nation of Israel, I'm going to wipe everybody out, and so on and so forth. What really happened at that time was it was literally the evolution of the species. People at that time were, number one, more clay-based than they are now. Right now, they are more thought-based. The ratio of clay and thought mixed together that makes up humankind. There's like a stray long hair around here somewhere. I'm trying to figure out where it is. I keep feeling it whenever I'm moving around. So anyway, people are a mixture of clay and thought. There it is. Found it. People are a mixture of thought and clay. That is what makes up a person. That's what makes a person that's what makes a person a human, is their mixture of thought and clay. Now, when you're mixing the two together and you have a certain mixture, you have a certain ratio of each. Well, if you have more clay and less thought, the life for that person is much smaller life expectancy, much lower life expectancy. It's much more difficult. It's much harder. It becomes more. It becomes more about the grind of the day. You grind your way through life. It's so much more difficult to actually get through life. And if you have a creature that is mostly thought-based, it has a higher thought-based ratio to the clay part of themselves. Life is much easier for them. They think more clearly. They go about their lives with more ease, more grace, more comfort. They have a lot more ease. They have a lot more comfort. They have a lot higher stability. They can do what they want with fewer consequences that are negative and greater consequences that are good. Excuse me. In the Old Testament, people were at, first of all, a higher ratio of clay to thought, and second of all, they were being led by God, and God and man had not met yet. This is before Jesus Christ. This is before everything. This is before the peaceful teachings of Jesus Christ. In another video, I've talked about how Jesus was a huge anomaly for his time, because at that time it was normal for there to be murder and rape, and it was actually quite prevalent throughout the time period. And Jesus showed up and started preaching pacifism and peace. Huge thing. It's a higher vibration than what they were doing, but it just feels so foreign to these people. So but what he was doing is he was increasing the ratio of thought to clay in people. He was making the amount of thought in them higher than the amount of clay, thus making their lives easier, more comfortable, more stable, things that they needed to have in their lives. So hey guys, so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today is the reason why the Old Testament was so difficult, so hard on people, is because God and man had not met yet. There was a lot of information that was downloaded into the spirit world through Jesus Christ coming down to earth and living his life as a human for 33 years before he, I say this because I'm 33 years old, so I can just say that. Yeah, look at me. No, I'm kidding. It's all a big joke. Jesus Christ came down to earth and he lived as a human for 33 years and then he ascended back into heaven. So this is a kind of a big deal that Jesus was in this position to do all this. Jesus was he was experiencing life as a human to learn about humanity, to interact with his project that he'd started with Yahweh, and Jesus with his father Yahweh. And Jesus was, or Yeshua, however you want to say his name, Jesus or Yeshua, he was here to fulfill prophecies. He was here to bring about a higher level of thought. He was here to study in person the human creatures, live as a human, live as a mixture of clay and thought rather than just pure thought like he is now. So what happened was before Jesus Christ came along, there was an expectation from the thought world about the mixture of thought and clay. The world that was the mixture of thought and clay, it was being held up to the standards of the purely thought world. Okay, so the spiritual world, a lot easier, a lot more comfortable, a lot simpler than the physical world, and it's because the spiritual world is only thought, and literally there's a hierarchy of the lesser thought is the most chaotic and the less clear, and the higher thought and the people who are at the top of the pyramid, which would be Yahweh and Yeshua, they have the highest clarity of thought and they have the greatest ease of thought. Okay, so and that's in the spiritual world alone. So now we have the earthly world, the mixture of clay and thought, and that was being held up in the Old Testament. That was being held up by the same standards as the spiritual world. So the first thing they did was they picked some leaders. They picked Noah, Moses, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They picked up, or if you're Muslim, then they picked Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, and so on. So it wasn't just Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but there was also the other son of Abraham, which is Ishmael. So, and his descendants. So you put these two things together, and so the first thing that the Yahweh and Yeshua did is they picked out the leaders of the earth, and they inspired them. They gave them a greater amount of thought, a greater ratio of thought to clay. So now these people have a much easier lives. So now they're not only leaders as they were before, but now they're great leaders, and now their lives are flowing in abundance, and everything is going much simpler for them. Everything is going the way it should for them, and they're traveling and they're spreading and they're growing, and all of this is happening. Okay, all of this is happening, and Yahweh and Yeshua then try to speak to them, and then speak through them to the rest of the people, saying, okay, you've got to have a higher thought to clay ratio if you want to be high-level human beings. And so Yahweh and Yeshua, they imposed a lot of rules. And if you read the Old Testament, if you read the things that were imposed upon Israel, the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, the different tribes of Israel, the Levites were put in charge of the priesthood, all the things that the priesthood had to do, all the things that the other people had to do to support the priesthood. It was very, very involved. It was very, very difficult. It was difficult by even today's standards, even with today's technology. Back then, it was almost impossible to do. It was really, really hard. So what was happening is there was a mixture of thought and clay, and it was being held up at the standard of the purely thought world, or the purely spiritual world. And of course that was impossible because clay is mixed in with the situation. Clay is mixed in with the thought. So that made instantaneous creation, instantaneous metaphysical, springing up from thin air. They made that so much more difficult, so much more difficult. So when you're looking at, hey James, when you're looking at why the Old Testament was so much more difficult than the New Testament or any of the times since then. Around the 1700s, we went through a major era of enlightenment. We've had eras of enlightenment over the course of humanity. And 1700s had several all kind of smashed together. So, just kind of smushed together, and that increased humanity's consciousness really, really fast. So it increased it by several degrees. So that was great. Today, the entirety of humanity, the consciousness of humanity, is at a much higher vibration than it ever was during biblical times. Things are much easier and more comfortable for us now. I honestly don't think that during biblical times something like electricity or the telephone or technology could have been invented, because it literally was impossible for those people to think outside of their particular thought clay ratio. Today we have a higher thought to clay ratio. We have much more thought than we do clay within ourselves. So we have a higher capacity to do things with more ease and more comfort in a way that at that time back then they just did not have that capacity. So Jesus Christ really he really got humanity up to the next level. I do know that all throughout the Old Testament, a lot of years have passed, a lot of hundreds of years were passing, a lot of generations were passing, and the whole thing was just way more difficult. It was way more, it was way more difficult than it ever really had to be. But there came a point when humanity was really plateauing. You can tell when something is plateauing when something new it keeps trying to push up out of the earth. This plant keeps trying to spring up out of the earth, and it just won't break the ground. And one of the things that Jesus Christ did was he showed up, and he actually broke through the ground, and he showed people how to do that. And that got people to the next level. And ever since then, he's been worshipped as the Son of God. So I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I believe that he was Yeshua manifested in human form. However, even if you are a Jew or Muslim and you don't believe that, it's okay. Please understand that even if you only believe that Jesus was a prophet, he was one of the biggest deciding factors in the course of human events, because he broke through the earth. He was the plant that broke through the earth and got people to the next level, got humanity to the next level, because for hundreds of years we still weren't breaking through the crust of the earth. We were a plant, and we kept growing and spreading underneath the earth, but we weren't getting up in there. We weren't getting up into the light, into the sunlight. And what Jesus Christ did was he showed up, and he got people up into he got people up into the air. He got people up into the open air and the sunshine and the rain, something that they just hadn't been in before. So if you want to understand why the Old Testament was so difficult, number one, we had a much higher clay to thought ratio. So it was more clay than thought. Today we have more thought to clay ratio. Number two, there was not this downloading of massive information into the spiritual world, like what happened when Yeshua came down and was a Christian, was a Jew in the New Testament, and he actually downloaded all this information into people. And he downloaded peace into people, and he downloaded the human experience into the spiritual world. That was something that really connected the two existences, the purely thought world and the thought and clay world mixed together. So Jesus Christ really connected the two things. Even if you believe that Jesus was only a prophet, that really cinched the connection between them. It was no longer a sketchy internet connection. It was now, pure cable wire, pure cable internet. It was perfect, and it was perfect in every way. Super, super fast, and very reliable. And another reason why the Old Testament was so difficult was because the thought and claim mixture was being held up to the standards of the purely thought or purely spiritual world. Guys, I want to remind you that I do take financial blessings. That would be the first link there. I want to thank you so much for all the things that you bless me with. And now I'm going to do what I normally do, which is solve my Rubik's Cube. And I want to talk about you, the second part of this. I want to talk to you about what I've been learning lately. So first, I need to mix this up. It's all solved right now, but I need to mix this up. And I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to just kind of riff a little bit about some of the things that I've been experiencing lately. I've been experiencing a lot of religious kind of putting other religions down, and I want to explain to you why this is happening. Today, we consider to be highly intolerant to put all other religions down besides our own, but there was a time when this was kind of the norm, and also, and with some generations of people, even some of the younger generations, it can also kind of be the norm depending upon how you were raised. But I want to explain to you why it was such a big deal that that people differentiate out their religions back in the Old Testament and in the New Testament and in more recent years. And I want to explain to you why it's no longer that big of a deal now. Hey, Dwayne. Hey, Theodore. So the reason why people go through this massive transformation is when they reach a religion and it teaches them something and they really feel like they're getting benefit from it, their minds start going along the tree branch paths, the set out for them paths of that religion. And of course there's a lot of ease and comfort in that whatever religion they are learning, and so of course they want to keep that religion up. Okay, so this is all mixed up, and I'm going to start solving it while I riff about in the second part about what I'm doing here. About what I'm doing here with the Old Testament, and we've already discussed the Old Testament, but when I'm talking about the different religions, there were a lot of, even in biblical times, there were a lot of, okay, this is pagan, this is Christian, this is godly, this is ungodly. And I want to talk to you about what the reality of that is, because a lot of people don't understand that there's actually a greater truth involved when it comes to religion and religious tolerance. But first, let's talk about why people have that intolerance to begin with. The biggest thing you need to remember about religion is that in order to recruit people, you have to tell people, we are for this and we are against this. This is the same, and this is true for political parties as well. So if you're into politics and you understand what politics are about, this is exactly the same thing that politics do. You cannot go into politics and be just for something. You can't be for generally everything or be for certain things and whatever and not really be that against something else. People want to know what you're for, and they also want to know what you're against. The same thing occurs with religions. Each religion, in order to recruit people in, and this is especially true in the early church, but it is still happening today, in order to draw people in, the leaders of the church, they recruit people into their congregations or into their religion by telling them, okay, we are for this and we are against this. And they clearly define what they're for, and they clearly define what they're against. And what they're wanting to do is they're wanting to recruit a family of like-minded believers. Hey, Kathy Lynn. And they're wanting to get everybody on the same page, doing the same thing, so that because anytime you have a group of people that all believe the same thing and are in agreement, you have a huge mastermind going on. If you don't believe that, go to any scientific symposium. Okay, these are all people who they understand the same laws of science, they follow the same laws of science, and they believe the same thing, and they're looking at technology that somebody's come up with and the proof behind it. That's a huge thing. Well, it's the same thing with religions. In order for ministers, preachers, imams, or whoever to recruit people, they have to tell you what they're for and what they're against, because people want to know. People don't just want to know what you're for, they also want to know what you're against. So this is a standard political move. So if you find a religion being ultra intolerant to certain things, for example, when I'm in some Christian, they will openly put down Muslims. Okay, what they're really putting down are the terrorists. Okay, they're not Muslims. Terrorists aren't Muslims. Terrorism is about force, and forcing people to do what you want them to do. This is a very anti-human, anti-life, anti-God thing to do. Okay, but Muslims are actually very peaceful people, and Muslims are pro-people and pro-life and pro-God. So what they're doing, they're not necessarily being anti-Muslim. What they're actually doing in those churches that preach high amounts of intolerance is they are saying, this is what we're for and this is what we're against. If you're going to be part of a congregation, you have to believe these things and not believe these things. Okay, all they're trying to do is create like-minded followers. There's nothing wrong with this. This is a standard political move. Any leader knows, how to do this. Any good taught, trained leader, especially anybody taught in leadership tactics and practices, they know what to do. They know how to pull this stuff off. They may not believe those things personally themselves, but this is how they recruit more followers to their cause, their religion, or their church, or mosque, or whatever. So, and now, I have found I tend to attract people to myself who are religiously tolerant. So, I know quite a few Muslims who are not anti-Christian, but I know a couple who are anti-Christian, and it's okay. All they're doing is saying, this is what we're for, this is what we're against. They're just defining their group of people. That's all they're doing. The same thing with us in our churches. I go to a couple of Protestant churches every week, and they both put down the Catholics. I also go to Catholic Cathedral every week. I go to Catholic Mass every week. But the Protestant Christians, they put down the Catholics because they're busy saying, this is what we are for, this is what we're against. And they give you lots of contrast in their messages. Okay, I've got one side done, and I've got around 2 levels done. But I want to explain to you that one of the big reasons why people are so very much intolerant of some things, intolerant of others, is because 1, 2, 3, is because they've just been trained in their group. That's all. And so if you're in a situation where you feel like a group is being very intolerant to another group, please understand that all they're doing is defining the perimeters of their group. That's all they're doing. They're just defining the perimeters of their group. It's okay as long as it doesn't lead to actual violence or actually bad-mouthing people you know. Bad-mouthing people you don't know, that's kind of something that we all do. So I can't counsel you to not do that. I would prefer it if you didn't do it, but I can't counsel you to not do it because everybody bad-mouths people they don't know. But the truth is, you probably know people from every single religion in the world. There are women who are Muslim, and they don't wear head coverings because the head coverings are not about Islam. The head coverings are only about the tradition of that family or your background or whatever it is you came from. The head coverings, if you think about Afghanistan and their blue burqas, you don't have to worry about their blue burqas. I assure you, it's not about Islam at all. It's about the culture, okay? People often define something as being religious-based when, in fact, it's just culture-based. So that's something that is a unique Afghan cultural thing, and it was started by the Taliban, yes, but it's not religious-based. It's cultural-based. It's history-based. Okay, so I've got another side solved, and I've got the last part. This is the part I have to concentrate on. Okay, 1 foundation, 2 foundation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what I want to, before I finish here, I want to thank everyone who has donated to me and blessed me financially. That link is right at the top if you'd like to do that. And I want to thank everyone who has already done so. You guys really bless me and help me out with all of this. And the last thing I want to say is I want to tell you that I myself have gotten quite offended by people who are defining their group, defining who they are, and hello Adair, hi. I love Adair Buckner, she's awesome. She takes care of all the cultural beauty in America, not America, in Amarillo, and the music and culture and art and just so many beautiful things, and I just love what she does for our community. So this is all solved now, and I want to finish this up by talking about my own experiences with this. I have been both intolerant to certain religions and offended when other people are intolerant to it. And that is something that has really affected me deeply because I have a naturally intolerant nature. And so whenever one of my intolerances goes away, I suddenly am intolerant to others being intolerant about it. So I want to encourage you that if somebody is defining their group, especially a leader is defining their group saying we're for this and we're against this, please don't assume that they personally believe those things. They're just using major recruiting tactics for their religion, for what they're doing. But please don't assume that they are intolerant to those other groups. The truth is, they find those other groups interesting. They find those other religions interesting, and they welcome and jump on any chance to interact with those people and learn more about them and their religion because it's fascinating to them. But they do have to recruit their own followers, and in their followers, in their congregations, or whoever their followers are, they do have to define we're for this and we're against this. So this is just a little thing on the end of my talk about the Old Testament, because I just wanted to make sure that everybody understands that that does not mean that you go out and you start preaching intolerance yourself. They're just defining their groups, and you can belong to any group you want to or multiple groups, like I do. My Five Faiths blog is the second link on there, and you can find all kinds of interesting things on my Five Faiths blog. And I have Five Faiths: Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, Judaism, and of course science, because faith and science cannot be separated out from each other. Okay, I love you guys, and I want to thank you again for all of your support, emotionally, through prayers, and financially. I love you guys, what you're doing. Thank you so much. Bye.